The wind tore across Chiron 9's icy plateau like a million tiny shards of glass against the survey shuttle's hull. Captain Nera Solstice pressed her back into the cold metal, dark eyes fixed on the dim glow of Helios Station's buried dome. In the distance, her breath came in ragged puffs inside the suit, each exhalation turning to crystals that sparkled for a moment before drifting away on the gale. She clipped the tether from her suit to the shuttle's airlock and slowly made her way down the narrow ramp, careful not to slip on the treacherous frost that glazed every surface. Each footfall crunched loudly in the eerie stillness as if announcing her intrusion on this desolate world. Despite 2 weeks of isolation, despite the creeping panic she felt in her chest, she refused to let herself run. Help had to be here, somewhere. Behind her, a faint whine broke through the howl of the storm. She paused and looked over her shoulder. Reek, her genetically engineered companion, limped toward her on 4 crystalline paws. His fur, once a radiant fusion of Arctic, wolf patterns and prismatic light-refracting filaments, was dulled by ice weighed down by freezing moisture. His great pointed ears drooped, and his breath sounded more labored than they had yesterday. Nera's chest tightened. "Easy, boy," she murmured, crouching so that her visor hovered level with his. She scooped him into her arms, his weight surprising, even through the reinforced layer of her EVA suit. His eyes, normally bright pools of azure, were glassy and dim. She swallowed against the sting of tears that threatened to freeze on her cheeks. "Hold on, Reek. We're almost there." The shuttle's front hatch groaned as she pried it open. Inside, the temperature hovered just above absolute zero, heating systems long since failed. Sparks sputtered from a damaged conduit overhead, casting jittery shadows across the cramped cockpit. Panels of broken glass and loose wiring lay scattered across the floor. Nera wasted no time. She hefted Reek onto the central console, then ducked under a dangling cable to flip the core power switch. Blue arcs of plasma coursed through the wiring, and the emergency lights flickered to life, casting a weak warmth over the instruments. Rick stirred, his eyelids fluttering. Nera exhaled, relief rushing through her limbs like heated water. She tore open a thermal pack from her utility belt and pressed it to his crystalline flank. Beads of frost hissed as they melted against the pack's surface, but soon a steady glow spread across the module. Rick breathed deeply and his fur began to shimmer faintly once more. For a moment, all that existed was the rhythmic tick of the shuttle's revived systems and Rick's soft, measured breathing. Then the faintest tremor under her boots, like distant thunder, pulsed through the hull. Nera's heart skipped. She activated her helmet's external mic. "Helios Station," she called out. "This is Captain Solstice. Do you copy?" Static was the only answer. She tried again, raising her voice over the storm's howl. "Helios, respond." Silence. She glanced at Rick, whose eyes tracked the viewport. The windstorm had subsided into a low, mournful shriek, and the dome's glow had flickered once before, dying entirely. Without the station's power, the atmospheric chargers would fail soon, and her suit's heaters couldn't compensate. At this rate, they'd be icebound forever. Nera's fingers trembled as she keyed open the comm log. Entries from 2 weeks ago scrolled by. Day 0. Approach arrived at Chiron 9. Weather severe but within tolerances. Initial systems diagnostic green. Day 3. Surface survey core drills set. Samples harvested. Station integrity holding. Day 7. Solar flare station power diverted to shields. External communications offline. All crew accounted for. Day 9. Hull breach west corridor collapsed. 2 injured. Med team en route. No communications. Day 12. Evac order. Earth fleet denied further manned missions. Helios to operate autonomously until conditions improve. Day 14. Shutdown core reactor at critical. Initiating emergency protocols. Distress beacon activated. She swallowed hard. The last entry, her own handwriting, ended with an ominous ellipsis. Since then, nothing. The solar flare had fried the station's comm arrays, the hull collapse, cut off internal maintenance crews, and the Atlas incident back on Earth had shifted political priorities. Chiron 9 was no longer a frontier. It was a forgotten outpost. Yet she wasn't ready to give up. Not when Riek's gentle warmth reminded her that life still clung here to the ice. She rose, secured the hatch behind her, and tapped coordinates into her HUD. The station's main airlock lay a scant kilometer north. Her suit's power gauge read 20 minutes of sustainable warmth. If she hurried, they might reach shelter before absolute zero claimed them both. The wind had dropped to a brutal whisper, but the cold remained merciless. Nira trudged forward, sledding her boots through waist-high drifts. Every step demanded effort. Her suit's hydraulic actuators struggled to maintain mobility as temperatures plummeted. Halfway there, the ground beneath her cracked open. She stumbled, flailing for balance as the icy shards fractured into a cavernous fissure. The void called to her in its silent hunger. One wrong move, and she'd vanish into a crevasse deeper than any canyon on Earth. She froze, breath stalled, then forced herself to resume. One step at a time. Behind her, a soft whine reminded her of Riek's plight. She knelt in the wind-blown snow and pressed her palms against his pelt, transferring what little warmth she had left. He licked her gloved hand, a tiny gesture of reassurance. "Almost there," she whispered, voice cracked. "We'll make it." At the sound of her words, the buried dome reappeared, an icy silhouette against a purple-gray sky. A broken section of plating gaped like a missing tooth. But the secondary airlock hatch hung open, awaiting her arrival. Hope flared in her chest, bright enough to rival any reactor. She wrapped an arm around Riek and pushed the final meters, stumbling, through the threshold. Inside, the airlock's heaters sputtered before giving way, but the cargo bay beyond held residual warmth. Nira dropped to one knee and unlatched Riek's harness so he could stretch his legs. He shook his fur, scattering shards of ice like glitter, then nuzzled against her shoulder. She pressed her forehead to the translucent wall of the cargo bay, closing her eyes. For now, they were alive. For now, the frozen frontier had granted them a sliver of mercy. And somewhere beyond the ice, salvation waited, if only she had the strength to call for it. The cargo bay's dim red lights pulsed with a heartbeat of residual power, casting long shadows over cracked supply crates and frozen maintenance drones. Captain Nira Solstice leaned against one of the crates, her breath fogging the visor as she tried to still her racing heart. Every nerve in her body hummed with exhaustion, but sleep felt as distant as the stars above. She unfastened Riek's thermal pack and watched him nosing through a drift of synthetic nutrient bars. Each crunch sounded absurdly loud in the silence. The station's life support was offline, leaving them alone with the echoes of a forgotten outpost. Riek found a bar, cradled it between his crystalline paws, and nibbled with delicate precision. As he ate, his fur regained a faint luminescence, an iridescent glow that warmed Nira's soul more effectively than any heater. Gently, she brushed a fingertip along his spine. "You saved me, you know," she whispered. The words trembled on her lips, half apology, half confession. She closed her eyes and let her mind drift backward, where the memory burned brighter than any beacon. Finding Riekton days ago, on a storm-black night, the survey shuttle's sensors had detected an anomaly perched on the edge of a frozen ravine. Officially, protocol dictated a thorough scan and retreat. Chiron 9's surface was hostile enough without chasing phantom readings. But Nira had been restless, haunted by missing her team, by the unanswered calls for evacuation. Impulsively, she'd descended alone. Below, through swirling whiteout, she'd found him. A tiny creature no larger than a wolf pup, trembling in a swirl of crystallized snow. Its satiny fur was already spiked with ice, and its lungs wheezed. Against the merciless cold, Nira recognized the genetic signature instantly, a forbidden experiment merging Arctic wolf DNA with synthetic cryo-adaptive nanofibers. Classified as an abortive project, it shouldn't have existed. Yet here he was, abandoned on an alien world. She'd scooped him into her arms, heart pounding with equal measures horror and wonder. For an hour, she'd held him against her chest, sharing her body heat until he stirred, eyes blinking open like twin slivers of moonlight. In that moment, the lonely expanse of Chiron 9 felt less infinite, less unforgiving. The bond forged in Frostback in the shuttle's biolab, Nira had worked around the clock to stabilize him. She patched ruptured capillaries with cryogel, administered nano-repair serums, and reprogrammed a portable incubator to simulate an arthropod's thermal core. Slowly, Rick had healed, and each day his coat had grown brighter, shifting through blues and violets as light refracted within the crystalline fibers. But it wasn't the science that mattered. It was the bond. On the third morning, when she'd slipped in her gloves and tried to resume her solo mission, Rick had let out a soft whine and pressed his muzzle into her palm. She'd abandoned her route, spent the entire day tracing his playful paw prints through the lab, teaching him to retrieve tools and respond to her voice commands. He learned so fast, perhaps too fast, picking up signals on every frequency, anticipating her needs before she spoke. In the evenings, when the Helios crew shared ration packets and makeshift stories, she'd carry Rick in her arms like a child. Other officers eyed the hybrid creature warily. Some recoiled at the forbidden splice, others gawked at his beauty. But Nira ignored them all. Rick had become her solace, a living reminder that life could thrive even on the fringes of human ambition, echoes of abandonment. Her thoughts slipped back to the present as she watched him finish the nutrient bar. The cargo bay's airlock hatch groaned open a fraction, and a frigid rush of wind fell over them, sending shivers through the metal ribs of the station. Rick bristled, his hackles lifting, crystalline fur flaring like a defensive aura. Nira stood and checked her HUD. Shelter temperature 80 degrees C, suit reserves 15 minutes. Time was bleeding away. She tapped her gauntlet and the navigation grid flickered into view, overlaying a path to the station's engineering sector, where the central heating manifold lay frozen, but still intact. If she could jury-rig the manifold divert power from the auxiliary reactor to the galley heat exchanger, they might buy another few hours of warmth. She swallowed hard and turned to Rick, his head tilted, as if reading her mind. "I need you," she said softly. "Just like I needed you back there." She traced a line down his crystalline muzzle, fingertips lingering on a smooth patch of fur. "Ready?" Rick stood and nudged her elbow with his cold nose. Together they stepped into the corridor, the red emergency lights casting reflections in Rick's glowing pelt. Every footstep echoed down the frozen steel hall, each breath a visible plume of mist. The station groaned around them, joints contracting in the relentless cold. As they moved deeper into Helios Station, Nira felt the weight of the past 2 weeks settle on her shoulders. But with Rick at her side, primal and synthetic, wild and wondrous, she knew she wasn't alone. The ice might stretch into infinity, but they would carve out a path. And somewhere beyond the frozen silence, hope was still alive. The howl of the wind had subsided into a mournful moan, but the cold pressed in with even greater intensity. Captain Nira Solstice and Rick crept through Helios Station's damaged service tunnel, the walls lined with shattered conduits and ice-coated bulkheads. Her suit's HUD flickered as it fought to recalibrate in the electromagnetic interference, a warning that they were deep in the station's heart, far from any remaining power nodes. Rick padded silently at her side, crystalline claws clicking on the metal grating. His fur glowed like embers in the gloom, casting prismatic fragments of light on the frost-laden walls. Each shimmer seemed to mark their progress, one step closer to warmth, one step closer to salvation. Suddenly, the tunnel forked. The map in Nira's mind, once confident, blurred. Both branches were coated in knee-high snowdrifts, and the emergency lights overhead flickered in erratic pulses. She tapped her gauntlet, cycling through map overlays, but the signal was too weak to pinpoint her location. Panic fluttered at the edges of her resolve. "Heads up," she whispered to Rick, crouching behind a frozen vent panel. The crystalline wolf nosed her elbow, his muzzle dusted with frost. His ears flicked toward the darker branch on the right, where the vent cover had been pried loose, a faint breeze drifting through, Taking a deep breath, Nira followed Reek. Her gloved fingers brushed against a console rail, leaving streaks of thawed ice in their wake. Each sensor beep was a reminder. Suit integrity was dropping, thermal reserves ticking down. They had minutes, not hours. As they rounded the bend, a sliver of light danced ahead, a warm golden glow stark against the station's cobalt gloom. Nira froze, heart pounding so loudly it echoed in her ears. The glow came from a portable lamp, its battery pack humming in the cold. Beside it lay a compact, military-grade power unit, one she recognized from Earth fleet specifications. Before she could process what she was seeing, a metallic click sounded. Instinctively, Nira raised her arm, searching for the sound's source. A figure stepped from the shadows, tall, imposing in a reforged suit of recon division armor. The helmet's visor was lifted, revealing a pair of keen amber eyes that flicked over her and Reek in rapid assessment. "Don't move," the stranger said, voice calm but edged with steel. His breath made the words fog in the cold air. "I'm not here to fight, yet." Nira's pulse throbbed. "Who are you?" she demanded, lowering her arm but keeping her stance guarded. "How did you get here?" He took a slow step forward, centering himself between her and the corridor. "Lieutenant Cassian Vale, United Earth Fleet, solo recon mission. Ship lost power in a solar anomaly. EVA suits deployed automatically. I tracked your distress beacon." She swallowed hard, disbelief warring with relief. "You're real," she said, voice unsteady. "I thought all fleet operations were diverted after the Atlas incident." Cassian's jaw clenched. "They were, except we picked up Corlin signals. Unidentified transmission. Command greenlit a blind drop. I volunteered." He paused, eyes flicking to Rick. "And you must be the subject of the unauthorized experiment." Nira's cheeks burned beneath her helmet. "Rick is," she began, hesitating as she measured her words. "He's not a weapon. He saved me." The lieutenant's gaze softened fractionally. He knelt, placing both hands on the power unit to reconfigure its outputs. Sparks crackled as he rerouted energy through a jury-rigged inverter. "We're going south. Engineering sector, central manifold. You still have 50 minutes of heat. I can extend that to an hour if I stabilize this pack." Rick padded forward, standing between them. His crystalline pelt glimmered, reflecting Cassian's lamplight. He whined once, then nudged Nira's leg, urging her to trust. Nira exhaled, tension easing from her shoulders. She nodded toward the dark tunnel ahead. "Lead the way." As Cassian rose, he clipped the power unit to his belt, offering her a small thermal beacon. "Follow me and keep Rick close." Together, soldier, scientist, and genetically forged companion, they stepped deeper into the frozen labyrinth of Helios Station. Every pulse of the thermal beacon was a lifeline, a promise against the dying cold. Far ahead, the faint glow of the engineering sector awaited, and with it, the slim hope of survival, if they could reach it in time. The engineering tunnel emptied into the shuttle's galley, a rectangular chamber half-packed with crates of emergency rations and spare components. Overhead, a single luminescent strip struggled to pierce the gloom. The rest of the lights lay shattered like fallen comets. Steam hissed from a ruptured pipe in the corner, frosting half the room in a veil of crystalline mist. Cassian Vale moved with precise efficiency. He clipped his thermal beacon to a rail, then knelt beside a downed medjack drone. Fingers flying over the diagnostics pad, he rerouted power from the shuttle's auxiliary grid. Sparks showered the floor, but within moments the overhead lights steadied. Warm air seeped into the chamber, and the mist began to dissipate. Nira stood in the doorway, clutching Rick close. The crystalline wolf no longer limped, his gait was even, strong. He pressed a warm muzzle into her shoulder as if sensing her hesitation. Cassian sighed and straightened, wiping soot from his gauntlet. "There," he said. "We've got 4 hours of heat now, enough to plan our next move." She took a tentative step forward. "Thank you," she said, voice thick. He cut her off with a curt nod, already unpacking a small satchel. I need answers. Why was the station evacuated? Why leave you and him out here to die? Nira's eyes burned. She swallowed, forcing calm. Helios was never meant to be permanent. We were a research outpost, surveying ice crystal formations, testing adaptive habitat modules. Then the flares hit. The hull breach took out half our life support. Atlas incident on Earth made funding vanish overnight. They pulled the crew back. I stayed behind to finish data collection and keep the distress beacon active, just in case. Cassian's expression tightened. He passed her a field-rigged thermal injector. We'll need these on the trek. Nira pocketed the injector and met his gaze. I rescued Rek 10 days ago. He was dying in a ravine, an illegal splice between Arctic wolf DNA and cryo-adaptive nanofibers. Classified. If Command ever knew. Her voice trailed away. Cassian studied Reek in silence. The wolf tilted his head, crystalline fur refracting the stale light. There was a knowing intelligence in those azure eyes, an awareness beyond instinct. He's remarkable, Cassian finally said, but also a liability. If I report this, they'll quarantine or worse. Nira's heart thudded. I know, she whispered. I couldn't leave him to die. Cassian's jaw clenched. He paced to a bulkhead locker, pried it open, and revealed 2 gel packs stamped with the United Earth Fleet insignia. These are my spare emergency chems, stabilizers, sedatives, stimulants. Take what you need. Beyond that, we're on our own. She accepted the packs with gratitude, then asked, How did you detect us? He leaned against the locker, arms folded. After the Atlas pullout, we kept listening. A month ago, we intercepted an alien transmission, low-frequency pulses with a deliberate pattern. They called it the Corlin signal. Command formed a special task force. I volunteered for the first recon drop. My ship lost power during atmospheric entry. I ejected in an EVA pod. 5 days drifting, then this shuttle fielded my locator ping. Nira's brow furrowed. An alien signal? Here? Cassian nodded, gazing at the frozen viewport. Outside, Kirin 9's twin suns hovered on the horizon, their feeble light glinting off ice dunes. We're not alone on this planet. Something out there wants contact. Rick padded to the center of the galley and let out a soft growl, tail lashing once. Nira bent to scratch behind his ears. He sensed it too, she said. Ever since I brought him aboard, his instincts have been heightened. Cassian approached, eyes narrowed. Could he be reacting to the Corlin presence? Considered. It's possible. His nanofibers might pick up frequencies our instruments miss. A tense silence filled the chamber. Then Cassian nodded as though making a decision. Whether it's friend or foe, we need to investigate it after we get safe. The secondary beacon is 3 clicks northwest. Beyond that, we'll have to choose. Follow the rescue ships home, or chase the Corlin signal into the unknown. Nira's mouth went dry. Back on Earth, she had dreamed of discovery beyond charted space, yet she had also sworn to survive to return to her people. She looked down at Reek, who licked her glove, and felt her resolve harden. We'll get to the beacon first, then decide. Cassian offered a rare smile. Agreed. He clipped 2 more thermal injectors to her belt. We move in 20. Rest your suit, he said, unfastening the Medjack drone's cover to expose a compact heater wand. Use this on Rick. He'll need an extra boost. Nira took the wand, heat pulsing, through her fingertips as she held it against Reich's flank. He closed his eyes, fur settling around the metal tip in contentment. They settled into a planning silence. The drone's steady hum, the click of thermal vents opening, the distant roar of wind through the station's gaps. Outside the hollow, planet waited, an expanse of ice and possibility. When the timer blinked down to 10 minutes, Cassian checked his rifle's charge pack. Suit up, he said. Darkness won't wait. Nira nodded, strapping on her secondary heater. She reached for Cassian's handling strap on her own harness. Lieutenant Vale, she said softly. Thank you. for risking everything. He looked at her for a long moment, then saluted with a half-smile. "Captain Solstice," he replied, "we're all risking everything now. Together." And as the galley's lights dimmed to signal their departure, the three of them, scientist, soldier, and living bridge between, steeled themselves for the final push into Chiron 9's frozen heart, where hope and danger awaited in equal measure. The frozen plain outside Helios Station stretches out like shattered glass under the twin suns of Chiron 9. Their low light flares orange and violet across the endless dunes, turning each snowdrift into a cathedral of ice. Captain Nera Solstice squints against the glare, her suit's thermal gauges hovering just above critical. Behind her, Lieutenant Cassian Vale's lamp beam dances along her path, while Reek's prismatic pelt casts shifting rainbows on the snow. "Keep moving," Cassian urges, voice steady through the comms. "Beacon's only a click north." Nera nods, pressing forward. Every crunch of her boots through the powder feels like stepping on glass. Every labored breath fogs her visor. She taps a thermal injector against Rick's flank, the crystalline wolf lungs with renewed warmth, his head tilting as if in thanks, eyes bright as he bounds beside them. Ahead, the secondary beacon rises from the ice, a squat tower of scorched metal half buried under drifts. 3 solar panels flank its sides, canted at odd angles, and the comm antenna leans like a bent spear. Nera's heart leaps. This is their way home. Cassian kneels beside the beacon's control panel and sets to work. Frozen bolts pop as he unseals the maintenance hatch. Sparks from his portable injector flare and green lights flicker along the panel circuits. A low hum throbs through the tower. "Signal's going out," he calls over his shoulder. "We're patched into the Earth. Relay in 2 minutes." Nera exhales in relief, but the moment of peace shatters as a deep rumble rolls beneath their feet. The ice shifts, opening a long, narrow crevasse at their boots. She stumbles back, snags her tether, and lands hard in the snow. Reek leaps too, her side hackles raised, crystalline fur flaring into a defensive aura. Cassian shouts, "Get back!" But the ground heaves in one last groan before settling into silence. The crevasse yawns before them, a gap too wide to cross, too deep to see its bottom. Nera drags herself upright, threshold of panic at her throat. "No time for this," she mutters. She points at the beacon's side panel, left open. "We have to climb inside." Together they haul themselves onto the tower's weathered frame. The angle is steep, the metal biting cold through their gloves. Reek scales it like a sure-footed mountain goat, leaping to a small service hatch at the rear. Inside, the maintenance tunnel extends into the beacon's heart, a narrow crawl space lined with fractal circuitry and frost-rimmed conduits. The humming is louder here, like a heartbeat. Cassian kicks open a heavy panel and presses a manual override. The tunnel's bulkhead slides shut behind them with a pneumatic hiss. Nera's chest aches as warmth rushes in from the auxiliary heater, still weak, but enough. She checks her HUD. External temperature now at 140 degrees C, suit reserves 10, minutes left. Signals live. Cassian breathes, fingers flying over the beacon's core interface. Outside, Nera can almost hear the faint echo of distant engines responding to their distress call. At the base of the core module, they notice strange runes etched into a translucent panel, patterns that pulse softly in sync with Reich's breathing. The crystalline wolf noses at the etchings and they glow brighter beneath his touch. "Alien tech," Nera whispers, heart pounding. "This must be the Coralline transmitter." Cassian's eyes widen. "They integrated with our beacon. No wonder. We picked up both signals from orbit." He places a gloved hand on the runes. "We need to document this. Proof of extraterrestrial contact." Before she can respond, the hum spikes and the panel shifts, revealing a hidden compartment. Inside lies a single crystal shard, refractive, alive with inner light. Cassian reaches for it, hesitates, then carefully tucks it into his pack. "Agreed," he says quietly. "This changes everything." Nera exhales, relief and wonder warring in her chest. But first, she looks to the data console. "We head home." She taps the final sequence. A steady beacon pulses into the blood-red skyscape, a silent promise of rescue. The maintenance hatch slides open, revealing the storm-scarred plain beyond. Moments later, a distant glint. Rescue ships on the horizon, their hulls reflecting Chiron 9's dying light. Nira crouches, hand to her heart as a wave of emotion crashes over her. Cassian rests a hand on her shoulder. "We did it," he says softly. Rick steps beside them, crystalline fur blazing in the returning sunlight. Nira bends to his level, wrapping both arms around his neck. She presses her forehead to his muzzle and whispers, "Thank you, my friend." Above, the rescue ships descend through the violet sky, bringing warmth, safety, and a chance to share the truth of what they found on this barren world. As the shuttles hover, their heat radiating against the ice, Nira straightens, eyes bright with determination. The ice may have tried to claim them, but together, human and hybrid, they stood against the void and found hope. And beyond the horizon, of their salvation lay the Corlin mystery, waiting to be unraveled. But for now, rescue had arrived, and no storm, no silence could ever freeze the bonds they had forged.